Hey girl, what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each episode we celebrate a movie that my guest loves. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. Today it's a movie that I bet very few of you have seen, Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story. As my guest, the empathetic and extremely knowledgeable Jim Meadows will get into, it is not to be confused with the TV movie about Carpenter. Rather, it is an experimental film by a young Todd Haynes. The good news is that it's only 43 minutes and available on YouTube. We have a link in the show notes. Jim is not only steeped in his love for the Carpenters, he is a social worker by training and executive director of No Age, a great organization that advocates for LGBTQ plus elders in New Orleans. He therefore brings practical knowledge about mental health, which is a key part of this movie's composition. Let's dig in. Jim Meadows, welcome to the show, or welcome back to the show.
Hello.
So, for the benefit of the audience, Jim and I recorded this episode on Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story a couple of months ago. Well, we thought we recorded it, and your host and producer here did not actually manage to capture the recording. So, Jim has been extremely generous with his time to come back and record with us again. So, we won't try to recreate that conversation, but Jim, you have so many great thoughts on this movie and on Karen Carpenter that I know we're going to get something great here.
Oh, I'm happy to do it again. I enjoyed it.
All right. So, Jim, I'd love to talk about to start some of your history as a movie fan. When did you get into movies? How did your childhood experience with movies look?
Well, the first thing I remember, other than, well, I grew up in a town called Greensburg in St. Helena Parish, Louisiana. There's only about 600 people. So to get to see a movie in the theater, you'd have to go to Amite or Hammond or some other metropolis like that. So I do remember going to see movies with my parents at that age.
What were some early standout movies for you? What really grabbed you?
Oh, I really was fascinated before I even saw it by Splash. I remember seeing the cover of a magazine that had Daryl Hannah all decked out as this mermaid, and it just looked completely lifelike and real. And so I knew I had to see this movie, and I've probably watched it a dozen times over the years, and I just remember being fascinated by that imagery.
Nice. Early Ron Howard movie there.
Yeah, still Ronnie at the time, huh?
That's right. Now I know in addition to what you bring here as a movie fan, I know you are a huge fan of the Carpenters and of Karen in particular. Could you tell us a little bit about how you discovered the Carpenters and kind of what your relationship is with her and with the band?
I remember, I must have been in around the 4th grade, and there was this a lot of people of our generation saw this film. It was called The Karen Carpenter Story, and it was a TV movie that was, made initially I think it was made with the cooperation of her brother, Richard, although I've come to learn that he cut a lot of things out of it. They were rewriting every day to not, upset the family. But I think what I saw was a rerun because during between the scenes when I would go to commercial, this song came on, and it was the most haunting melody and most beautiful voice, just enchanting sound. And it wasn't until several years later I saw a cassette of their hit singles in some music shop, and I bought it, and I got to the track "Goodbye to Love." I said, "That's the song. That's the haunting melody, the mystery haunting melody." The other songs were great too, but I think that it's not played during the film. They played it when they were transitioning to the commercial, and but that movie was my first introduction to her. I didn't. I was listening to the music more than watching the story. I think because I was so transfixed by the sound of her voice.
Okay, so right from then, even seeing it in the context of the movie, it was the sound that grabbed you.
Yeah, I didn't know, like, to, say, "Hey, mom, dad, will you take me to the record store?" That wasn't something we typically did, but a few years later, as I became a teenager, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this I love her voice. Let me see if I can recognize any of these songs, and I certainly did.
And what is it about her voice? Because I have to admit, while I enjoy music, I have very little ear for it. But her voice definitely has a different quality than most pop singers, than almost any pop singer I can think of.
I think that well, I don't understand a lot about music either, Brad, even though I majored in it briefly. But she has what most people will refer to as a contralto range, which non-technically speaking is sort of the lower range that a female singer can have. And it's the rarest range. So I think that maybe for me was what initially was like, "Oh, this is a different sound."
I think of it as bringing a real haunted quality even to very poppy, and honestly, even more so. I've listened to the Carpenters more in the wake of seeing this movie, which I had not seen it until you proposed doing it. And so things that might be completely disposable pop in other hands, I feel like it's her voice that helps them transcend.
Her brother, Richard put it a little crudely, but he said, "The money is in the basement." It's when she hits those low notes, you just feel like she's right in the room with you singing directly to you. And I would say that it's a sincere sound. It's unaffected for the most part. Not a lot of little runs or frills, just unaffected, but a bit with a wry sound. And it very much from an era before irony began to pervade so much of pop music and pop culture. But it's certainly just, but other than that, it's also the harmonies, the overdubbing of their voices multiple times and harmonizing with one another. That was a technology that was pioneered by Les Paul. Some people know the Les Paul guitars, but he had a group with his singing partner, Mary Ford, and they sang that kind of overdubbed harmony, which I think was an inspiration to Richard and forming what would become the Carpenter sound.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I didn't think about. I think you make a great point of the pre-irony thing. The movie makes a point of talking about the fact that they were coming in an era of hard rock, but that was still straight ahead hard rock, very sincere, maybe overly sincere at times. It's pre-punk, which I think is really when we start to see punk new wave, when we start to see more irony in music. I hadn't thought about it quite in those terms before.
Yeah, it's just a sort of an innocent delivery of song that somehow manages to sound like something way beyond a 20-year-old's years. I believe they were 20 when she was 20 when they hit with their first, Close to You was their first hit song in 1970, ushering in that era, the Nixon era, really. They performed for Nixon, which is not one of my favorite things about them, but I don't think she gave politics very much thought, was not interested in it. Yeah, but that was just part and parcel of the time for them. They had a major image problem from day one. People would call them goody four shoes. Bette Midler make jokes about them to their face at the Grammy Awards. Young kids loved them, little kids, their parents and their grandparents loved them. I mean, somebody had to be buying these records, right? Because they sold more records than any other American pop group during the 1970s. But when you think about that era, you don't think of them as what teenagers and young adults were listening to. Um, I mean, they were in the closet, but yeah, they were very much considered embarrassing to be fans of.
Yeah, always interesting how that happens because they clearly were getting plenty of top 40 airtime. So there obviously were a lot of people listening, but there could be those acts that people say, oh, no, I don't listen to them. And that record's hidden in the back of their record collection. So when did you first, well, before we even get into when you saw this movie, Jim, and we don't need to go through plot right now, but let's tell the audience a little bit about this movie because like I mentioned, I think this is one that very little of the audience is going to have seen coming into this.
This is a film that was created by Todd Haynes, who became a darling of the indie film scene. over the years, but this was a student film for him. I think it was an idea that came to him while he was talking to someone else going to school with him at film school, and they used Barbie dolls as the actors for most of the film. But it also has it's playing out these scenes with Barbie dolls, and it's very uncanny and unsettling, and you start watching it, and you're it's she's singing the Barbie is singing along to a pop song on the radio, and you start and you kind of laugh. But as you watch the movie and you get into it, and you sort of forget that you're looking at dolls, it becomes something that's all at once. It's horrifying, it's funny, it's melodramatic, it's very cerebral. It has all these overlays of text that you can't really see. It's very campy at the same time, too, uncanny. But the dolls go from looking silly to really embodying the characters in what I think is a very compelling way. So even the humorous elements where you're laughing, you feel a little bit queasy. So you laugh in the beginning because it's absurd at first glance, but it's a nervous kind of laughter.
And you're throwing out a lot of things that it does, and I totally agree. And one thing I think through all of this is this movie is a tonal masterpiece. It knows when it's being funny and it knows when it's being harrowing. And Haynes is striking that very difficult balance for me of orchestrating how we feel without it feeling manipulative.
Yeah, it catches you by surprise. When you start it, you don't expect to where it's gonna go. I think it's an experience. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's something that's very immersive. I mean, you will either love it or you will say, "I never wanna see this again."
I have now seen it 3 times. I watched it again today, actually. I wanted to make sure I was fresh on it with us, taking a second swing here. It's a movie I can promise you I will revisit. One thing I will say for the audience is it's only 43 minutes long. So, if you just know this isn't for you, that's totally fine. But if you at all like experimental filmmaking and like to see something new and unlike anything you've ever seen, give it a swing. I do think that running time might make it more tolerable even for some people that would struggle if this was feature length.
Right.
And speaking of harrowing, to now sell against maybe what I just said, this movie starts with one of the more harrowing openings I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk us through that?
It's funny, I I forgot about that and instead went straight to the doll. It actually starts with more of it kinda looks like if you were watching one of those crime shows on TV, but it's very grainy because this film we can get into that. This film was basically illegal and had to be destroyed. So it's all very grainy, and it shows her mother walking through the house, calling her name, and walking up the stairs and eventually finding her on the floor of her closet, unconscious. And there's this, what do you call it? It's sort of a very, very quick montage, some really disturbing imagery from Holocaust from a Holocaust documentary that's repeated a few times as a motif and a scream. And from there, you're just like, "What the heck is happening?" And then you see the teenage Barbie doll singing along to Dionne Warwick.
Yes, it's that yes. We're seeing through the mother's eyes essentially in that subjective camera. And it is before it gets funny in the very next scene, it is setting us up for this is in a way a horror movie. And I really on this viewing, maybe this it probably is. I've been watching a lot of horror recently. My guests have been subjecting that on me. I'm not always a big horror fan. And I was thinking about on this viewing how much this movie uses the tropes of horror, like uses ominous music and music stings. Even there's a shot where she's in the hospital and there's the head standing over her in what looks like the classic Twilight Zone episode to me where the person's having surgery. Um,
Oh, yes, yes. I forget the title, but I love that.
the one where they reveal her beautiful face, and then we find out in their world it's a deformed face.
Right, right.
But which speaks to some body image issues as well, I think, that are relevant here. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. But I'm interested. I don't know how much of a horror fan you are, Jim, but I'm interested if that's an element that you see in it as well.
No, horror is if when it comes to genres, I think horror is probably my favorite. It's the most disappointing genre because you just watch so much trash to find something that's really decent. But I do love horror films.
So taking us a little off focus there, but so as more of a horror fan than me, sounds like a lot more of a horror fan than me. Is that something you think about in relation to this movie?
Yeah, I think it's a terrifying, horrifying movie. I I think that the best horror strikes at the heart of our deepest insecurities and fears and lamentations, sadness, loss, the possibility of sadness and loss, and it's a constant tension in our lives, and it sort of makes it into a piece of art, so we can step back from the experience a little bit, and experience as a work of art. I mean, there are consolations. My favorite, one of my favorite horror authors, Thomas Ligotti, he wrote an essay about the consolations of horror, and it's paraphrasing here, but the consolation in horror is this one thing, is that you're learning that there is someone else who's felt this kind of the kind of fear and anxiety that you have, and so you feel that human connection in the void.
Oh, that's really interesting. Boy, I'm gonna have to think on that. I feel like that's something that could inform all of my viewing of horror, to think about it through that lens.
Yeah, and seeing it with people, and it changes that the dynamic. If people laugh at something, it can break that tension, but you're sharing that. You're sharing the consolation of horror.
Very interesting. So in this movie, a lot of the horror obviously comes from so much of this movie is focused on her anorexia and mental health issues as a whole, and not surprisingly, the horror is based in that slash attendant to that. I'm interested in your thoughts on how this movie handles those very weighty issues.
I'd say the greater horror than the eating disorder is the family. This is a movie about a family, a very dysfunctional family who their fortunes were to the detriment of everyone. They made money, that became famous, but they lost the most talented person in the family. I think in that way, it's something, another horror movie that it's one with Tony Collette that everybody loves. Well, horror fans love, and Hereditary. I think it has that kind of, oh gosh, this family is so messed up, but you're just so moved by the whole experience of seeing it play out. But yeah, certainly the eating disorder is the canvas upon which she plays that all out, and wrenches a little bit of something that's her own, that doesn't belong to anyone else but her. Ultimately,
There's an
her undoing, but yeah.
there's a line that really hit me this time in the conversation when she acknowledges her eating disorder to Richard for the first time. She says, "I'm just starting to realize that it isn't something good." And that really strikes me in relation to what you're saying of this thing being her own, being her power in a way, that really having to separate that idea from the idea of being something that's a virtue maybe, or a good thing.
Well, that's one of the rare things among the mental disorders about anorexia, is that the term they use is ego dystonic, syntonic. It's ego syntonic, meaning that it's something that, like, this feels like it's me. This is a good thing. I'm improving myself. I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be, as opposed to ego dystonic, whereas like someone who may be suffering from alcohol is that this is not who I am, but I can't stop. The anorexia is like, this is who I am and I won't stop.
Interesting. I'm bipolar and I can relate to that a little bit. I don't know if it falls under the definitions of the manic side of it feeling
Right, right.
like that,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that that in an unchecked manic episode, it can feel like, oh, this is me. I'm realizing my potential here
Exactly.
while, while leaving a path of destruction.
Well, and they allude to this in the movie when they talk, and this is it's not just an eating disorder. There was a a study done in the 1940s during World War II. The subjects were conscientious object objectors, and so the study was to look at the effects of starvation on the humans. Uh, the psychobiology of human starvation is the title. So it looked at biology and the psychology of it. And a lot of the symptoms that people experience with anorexia are just what anyone would experience after prolonged starvation, which is your body's releasing endorphins, and it becomes like a feeling of being high. And in the film, that's one of those, it's text over this, I don't know what you would call it. It's just a paragraph explaining all of this over the video. And they're talking about how anorexia is like that and feeling of being high. And then they start, such a feeling's coming. They start singing Top of the World, which is a great contrast. And you just hear that song in a totally different way than it was maybe originally intended.
Yeah, it brings to mind, we mentioned the dolls, of course, the use of montage and on-screen text. Now, when Jim refers to the quality, which you mentioned, again, for the audience sake, basically what you can find of this, you can find it on YouTube, but it sort of looks like fifth generation VHS recordings because that's largely what we have right now. So I don't know if that text on screen was completely visible in the original cut, but it's certainly difficult to read in many places, but still has amazing effect over the montage and over some still shots in the movie.
Yeah, and just and for people listening too, that the reason for that is that once this was initially screened at some art festival, when the Carpenter family got wind of it, they shut it down because they used the actual recordings without permission. I don't think that they were thrilled about how they were represented, but it was because of that, and they were required to get rid of all the copies, but you can't really do that. So when I first saw it, I had gotten it. I was in some 1990s internet group where you could trade stuff with fellow fans, and so I got a copy on VHS that is even more illegible than what you've seen. But that's part of that was part of the experience of this forbidden movie. I mean, for me, it's always gonna be the real Barbie movie, but it was just, that's part of it. You're seeing a copy of a copy of a copy. I think last time we talked, there's something ghostly about it because it's the ghosts of the original film, which we don't have. Maybe Todd Haynes has it somewhere, but he can't share it.
Even if they could somehow clear rights, a pristine version of this movie would kind of feel wrong.
Yeah, it would not work.
You mentioned the family dynamics at play here. And one thing that's interesting and I think great is it's not like an in your face, what is typically thought of as abusive portrayal of a family. I feel like you have to be more attuned into what's going on with the family dynamics to really pick up on what a negative environment this is for Karen.
Well, I think that yes, this is a family that they moved across the country for Richard. They lived in the Carpenters were born in New Haven, Connecticut. Richard was a very promising young piano prodigy, was taking lessons at the Yale School of Music as a teenager. They moved to the Los Angeles area to improve his chances of becoming a star. And Karen learned to play drums. She followed him with everything, and she wanted to be a part of this, so she learned drums because she was impressed by a high school classmate who was really good at the drums, and she became great at it. They won the Hollywood Battle of the Bands when she was 16 years old, but he was seen by the family as the golden child, and anything about her was fairly incidental. And I think that there was some amount of resentment that she was known publicly as the star of the group. The family did not. see it that way.
Interesting. And I think of honestly things that I am more attuned to now as an adult than somebody who spent a lot of time in recovery and recovery spaces of even when the mom's trying to be supportive, like during the fitting scene, she thinks she's being supportive by talking about her weight,
Yeah.
but she just gets it wrong and it ends up being negative enforcement. Not to let her off the hook completely, but even if it's not her intent.
Yeah, I doubt that that particular scene was a lot of the interesting thing about Todd Haynes is that a lot of this information about their dynamics were not really out there, and I mean, you couldn't just go online and look this up. But he he either really lucked out in his guesswork, or what I think is more likely, he did some really deep research, reading interviews with people who knew them and knew that this was kind of what some psychoanalysts would call a psychosomatic family, wherein the this eating disorder is it's acting out this drama in a way that seems bearable in comparison with being I'm not as good as him. They'll never love me for who I am. I'm always second best, even when the world was in love with her, you know?
I have no doubt you're right that he did research because it seems like from the little bit of research I've done since seeing it that he got a lot right. I think Todd Haynes' superpower as a filmmaker is empathy and almost an intuitive understanding of what makes people tick. I feel like I'm somewhat I shouldn't say unsurprised because I think this movie's a monumental achievement, but it it in a way doesn't surprise me that if he did a solid amount of research, that he could connect the dots in a way that even if not every scene is exactly what happened, connect the dots in a way that makes sense and is true to her experience.
When they were making the TV movie I referred to earlier, I think when it was either the screenwriter or direct someone, when they knocked on the door because they wanted to talk to her mother to get her input, and she literally opened the door and said, "I didn't kill my daughter."
Wow.
The first thing out of her mouth. It's a fascinating family. It's definitely not your average family story, but I think that people who maybe can't relate to stardom or an everybody's seen these different kinds of families. You never know what families are really like on the inside.
I've certainly found to be the case. An interesting element, and you could probably speak more to me than how true to life this is. Getting back to the horror thing a
Mm.
little bit, the A&M executive, I'm blanking on his name right off, but in his introductory scene, he is essentially introduced as Satan. I actually, just by chance, I watched The Mask of the Red Death earlier this week, and he's this very Vincent Price Satan figure in this movie.
Yeah, you're talking about Herb Alpert as represented in this film. I don't think he was a bad guy, but yeah, they certainly do, and it's a testament to how they. I don't know how to describe it to people, but he said all you have to do is put yourself in my hand, and he's a doll, and his hand is extending out and reaching out, about to just almost seize them. And then there's that motif happens again with the with the scream and the imagery from the Holocaust documentary.
And there is something, and I think we talked about this last time. I find, and I don't necessarily like have a decoding to this, but I find the use of hands in this movie fascinating.
Yeah.
There's that. There in the montages, we see human hands a lot. I would say to me, it speaks of the manipulation at play. But I'm wondering how you take that in, what you might read from it.
I just am so interested that and when we first spoke, that you noticed that it wasn't something that stood out to me, but yet there's all kinds of images of hands. There's one sequence you can hardly really tell because of how degraded the film is, but it's a spanking happening, almost like a father spanking their child. I mean, it's dolls. There's a lot going on in this movie that I've missed. I mean, every time I've seen it, I've noticed a little something different about it, and that was something I had not paid particular attention to.
Yeah, it is one of those films that I think I could watch it 10 more times and pick up different things. And I think a dozen knowledgeable and attentive film fans could watch it and come away with completely different, interesting elements that they grab onto.
Well, grab onto is right. I mean, it's about it's no, but this image of hands, it's control, isn't it? I mean, this is a movie about attempts at control and people battling for different kinds of control over their lives, over their careers, over their inner selves, over their families.
And that's boy, that really expands my thinking on it some because I was thinking manipulation, which of course is a kind of control, but generally with a negative connotation. I like broadening that out to control. Manipulation being one way it can manifest, but not the only way.
I mean, one of the few images too of hands is I think, no, I see. I'm starting to hallucinate images from this movie I hadn't seen. I was gonna say The Purging, but no, she didn't purge. She used what is it called? They don't have it
The
anymore.
the X-lax and then the Ipecac.
Ipecac, Ipecac
Yeah,
syrup. Yeah. I'm sure her like taking there's the human person like you have the view of the Ipecac coming in. It all very uncanny. And then you think, oh, she's done it. And then it's like, oh no, there's like 3 or 4 more bottles of the
and
Ipecac.
that comes moments after she gets
Mhm.
off the phone with the doctor saying she hasn't taken X-lax, and
Right.
it
Right.
it's and one thing that struck me in that, as somebody with addiction issues, is that game of telling the literal truth while lying.
Lying by
Um,
omission. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, she hasn't taken X-lax, but
Right.
she's moved on to something more powerful.
Which ended up being, at least according to the, uh, the coroner's report, that it was she died of imitine cardiotoxicity brought on by imitine poisoning.
I do think,
Can I
for
say
me, a
something about
strength.
more about
Go ahead, Jim.
real quick? Like,
Yeah.
that is on the death certificate, and yet the brother, Richard, he says, "That didn't happen. She would have never taken that. She cared too much about her voice." Like, they literally have the forensic evidence that she was using this, and he's still trying to preserve, like, "Oh, no, Karen wouldn't want to throw up. That's not her." Still trying to, like, project this fake image.
From what I know of him, I don't know that I want to be overly charitable to Richard, but also I have to wonder how much of that is denial in his own head. Like,
Right.
not necessarily just image, but maybe he really has to believe that for himself.
Yeah. Yeah, because that would mean that there was something that was bigger than the music in her life at that time, bigger than them, and that's
Right.
scary, you know?
I One thing I appreciate, and you might be able to more shed more light on the real life aspect of this, but I do appreciate that we get the sequence of her admitting her challenges, her eating disorder, and seeking treatment. And I don't know much in real life about the treatment she sought or how effective and for how long, if effective, that was. But I do, from a movie standpoint, like that we get a sequence of Karen taking some control of her own life and in a very
Mhm,
definitive conversation with the family saying, no
mhm.
one is coming with me. This is my journey.
Something I have to do alone, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was not a successful treatment, and the person who was her therapist was not even a I don't even think a licensed psychiatrist. He had her eventually admitted to a hospital, but he was not like what a typically licensed mental health person. He had written a popular novel, and he did see patients. I don't know what he was. He was not an authority on the subject. He had just written a book that did well. I think that was something like it was, but she did end up gaining some weight, but only by tubes.
So yeah, I didn't realize that. So even when they talk about the weight gain, it wasn't, yeah, she hadn't really curbed her behavioral issues, it sounds like.
Maybe I think towards the end of that, but it required most of the weight gain was it's actually was an not a nasogastric, but total parenteral. They call it nutrition. It's basically sugar going directly into your aorta to
Oh,
kind of
gotcha.
well. And I think they punctured her lung when they did it the first time. It was really kind of not what they would do to help someone today. Let's just put it that way.
We do get a touch in here as well, maybe more than a touch, but I was thinking of one explicit scene of kind of the media influence on her and on her eating disorder in particular. What I was thinking of with the direct one is when they reference the columnist referring to her as chubby. Interested in as much as you know about this. Look, we've talked about family, and clearly the seeds for this were sown well before any rise to fame. But interested in your thoughts on both how the movie handles that and if you know anything of her real life thoughts on that.
I think that that's an artistic license. They did something the funny thing is, they did something very similar in the TV movie too, like, almost the same line, but, my understanding is that that was not the I think they actually called Richard chubby, but if there was something like that in the media, no one has discovered it since.
Okay.
She saw she had dieted as a teenager and then stopped, and then she saw, I think around 1973, saw an image of her a video of herself on a TV program and decided she needed to lose weight, and it just continued and continued. But I certainly think that at that time, who knows, if she had not been she hadn't been a pop star, maybe she wouldn't have had to look at the TV. I think that that goes beyond just this. We're so, all of us, subject to this, seeing images, videos, social media. I mean, 150 years ago, most people didn't even have a mirror in their house. And now people are constantly looking at themselves. And it's interesting that that time period sees both the rise of, it sees the rise of eating disorders and body image issues, cosmetic interventions people are taking. Our brains have changed in the past, since the invention of the camera.
That's an interesting point. I mean, as we talk here, I can see myself in the bottom corner of my screen, and I know there's a way to turn that off, but I've never bothered to do it. Yeah, just the amount we see ourselves. I also, and something that I think the film addresses well in one of the montages is I see factoring into that, and look, maybe projecting my own issues here, but the world of plenty we live in. That for most of us, the acquisition of food is not a major obstacle as Americans. And frankly, even when we talk about like food deserts, that's more about the availability of healthy food. There is relatively little food insecurity in our society, certainly as compared to human history through the 19th century.
Yeah, I know the montage you're thinking of. They're playing it's the theme from A Summer Place in this '50s movie, and they're talking about that post-war boom, the baby boom that they were part of, where it was just unlimited opportunity, so to quote unquote. Maybe not for everyone, but it was this time of a lot of prosperity and people building homes in the suburbs. The imagery of the suburbs in this film is hauntingly beautiful. It's all of that whole era, which is gone. This film is one way to kind of catch a glimpse of what that might have felt like, but it's gone. There's so much happening in the movie. It's hard to even to stop one frame. There's multiple things happening. It's hard to kind of get a real to explain it. You kind of just have to see it, but it encapsulates so much in 43 minutes. It's
It
unbelievable.
absolutely does.
A lot of fans really hate this movie. Fans of the I should say that too. It's and so the opposite is true. You can not like the music. You can have you can not trust them. Like the one commentator said, she's like, I didn't trust them. You can have that opinion and still be moved by what this film really achieves.
Now, you mentioned the commentator. We see three commentators, I believe, like two of whom are identified as music critics and one as a singer. And I believe you told me that none of those are real. Is that correct?
That's yeah, the the guy in the shades, that's Todd Haynes,
Yeah.
who's kinda describing the yeah,
It's an interesting decision. I don't know if some of that was driven by the fact that finding those people and when you're a student filmmaker and getting critics on camera would have been interesting, or how much of it was just a formalistic choice that he thought it would be interesting to encapsulate those thoughts in three fictional characters.
Yeah, I would say it was a choice if I had to guess, because it's all just part of the whole. I don't think that like a quote unquote real interview would have worked as well.
Well, and this is a movie that uses a lot of artifice to tell a story that is in
Exactly.
part about artifice.
Yeah.
So, Jim, let me ask you, what else have we missed here? What are things that you want to address about this movie that I haven't thought to ask about?
Oh God. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, I think I think that I think it is it's unfair for her that she's so remembered for the reason that she died. When I think that she was just such an incredible talent. She was not, I don't think, based on what I've read and real interviews that I don't think she was this kind of sad person. I think she had her private struggles, but she had a really great sense of humor. If you watch some of the interviews with her on like the Tonight Show, the brother is just very stilted, and she's always cracking jokes. She had close friends who loved her. I think she was a bigger person than this film or any TV movie or any book can hold. And it's important to remember that about anyone who struggles with any kind of. Bette Miller does this routine called fried eggs. She talks about she's walking down 42nd Street and there's this huge woman walking down the street with a fried egg on her head. And she's like, oh God, if one day I wake up and put a fried egg on my head, please don't let anybody notice. We're all walking around carrying a fried egg. And that's not who we are. That's not the totality. We hurt, but there was more to her than an illness, and even more to her than the talent. She deserves to be remembered for, she brought a lot of joy into the world, but she was also someone's friend.
You were bringing tears to my eyes on my own show, Jim. That is not allowed. But no, thank you for that. I think it's such an important recognition. And again, as somebody in the world of recovery and in the world of mental health, both personally and in working with others, it is such an important thing to remember that we're all people and we're all so much more than any narrow definition, but in this case, especially a mental health definition.
Yeah.
So shifting gears slightly, this is a tough one, I think, for this question. But what other movies might you recommend to somebody who grabs hold of this movie and really loves it or is captivated by it?
Well, I think other Todd Haynes movies. And the one that I would recommend would be Safe, which is from 1995 and stars Julianne Moore, who's become kind of a muse for him over the decades. That movie, it's released in '95. It's set in the '80s, and it's about a housewife in a fairly affluent neighborhood, someone who's going to yoga and or no, not yoga, but like aerobics. But she starts to get in this unexplained illness where she seems to be allergic to everything in the environment. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the start. And so it's similar to Superstar in that it evokes this kind of tension and dread in that melodramatic kind of style. It's hard it's hard to explain. I also say like if you like this, or if you're a fan of David Lynch, then you'd appreciate Superstar more than most people, and vice versa. It has similar elements to his oeuvre.
Yeah.
It's dreamlike, but nightmarish, and there's all this uncanny stuff happening. If you like that kind of vibe, you know.
I might also throw Cronenberg in that mix, and
Oh
that
yeah,
if
absolutely.
you're
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
Cronenberg fan, you're likely to find something in this. An interesting note, and I don't think she'd mind me saying this, but my wife really detests body horror. It's not something she likes in film.
Right.
And she asked me about this one. She hasn't watched it with me on any of my three viewings. And when I reminded her today that it's done with Barbie dolls, she said, well, like when she physically changes, is that just kind of imagined? And I said, no, they actually shaved down the Barbie dolls, and that like horrified her. She's like, I'm out on this movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting to me that even with it being Barbie dolls and even with not seeing it, she had such a strong emotional reaction to merely that fact, which I think may not be unusual.
It's not even just the dolls though, Brad, because when they go to the scene of all these things are happening, just seeing a young woman eating food and you're seeing the mouth chew and it's not there's no manipulation going on, but you're kind of like horrified by mastication, and it is kind of a horrifying thing when you start to think about what we do to survive. But I think it's like seeing a natural body and being horrified, which is at the root of body horror. So yeah, this is not for her. I've thought a lot about body horror and this kind of thing.
A couple other movies I thought of. Todd Haynes, especially as he got a little further in his career, so inspired by Douglas Sirk's movies of the 50s, which were at least the first mainstream movies to kind of take on this suburban image. All that Heaven Allows is probably my favorite of the ones I've
But
seen. And then another one that comes to mind is Grey Gardens, which is a documentary
mm,
about two of the Kennedy relatives, Big Edie and Little Edie, living in this kind of in living in a dilapidated mansion, but at the same time, kind of living in a self-created world. And there's just something about this penetrating gaze into, I don't want to even minimize it and say penetrating gaze into to mental health issues, because both these movies are so much more than that. But like a penetrating gaze into humanity in a way that feels so real. In this case, even amongst the artifice.
I love Grey Gardens. I'd say it's a movie that's more forgiving of humanity than Superstar. But
Oh,
yeah,
I think I think so too. I think Grey Gardens, I think of it as ultimately an optimistic movie. I think,
yeah,
people
yeah.
may disagree on that, but I think it's kind of this wonderful portrait of eccentricity.
T for
That
Two. Oh my God. That when when older Edie is singing T for Two, it's the most human thing I've ever seen.
it really is. So those were my two that jumped to mind. But honestly, Todd Haynes, I wasn't the biggest May December fan, but he's almost got it, and most critics feel differently than me on that, I should say. He's got a close to can't miss filmography, in my opinion. Like, really, I mean, Carol's excellent. His documentary on the Velvet Underground is excellent. If you respond to this movie, I would recommend diving into his filmography as a whole.
What's the one that he made that's like sort of about David Bowie? I saw it in the theater and it's great. Ewan McGregor.
Velvet Goldmine,
There you go. Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
one.
Um,
If you like the biopics about musicians, it's not a biopic, it's fictional, but it's about as good as you could do for that genre.
yeah, that's an excellent one. That might actually be, I think that was likely the first Todd Haynes movie I saw. That was 98. I have seen Safe since, but I think I saw Velvet Goldmine first. Well, Jim, thank you so much for doing this with me again. I'm double checking, and this time we have this recorded. And so we will get it out there soon. And I can't believe I didn't know what a horror fan you are. But now that I know that, I need you thinking about what horror movie you can challenge me with and come on again with us and talk horror. I
Anything.
it, all right, excellent. Well, Jim, thank you again for being with me today, and look forward to talking with you both in real life and on the podcast real soon.
That'd be great.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.
That's it for this one, folks. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Thanks to the usual gang, especially the two Jeffs who have been working with me on some upcoming structural adjustments to the show. Julia Mott, you're the nearest thing to heaven I've seen. The music you hear at the beginning of the show and now is by my friend Richard Bates and his band The Huns. That's Hons. You can find The Huns music on Bandcamp. This Sunday, we stay in the 80s, but for a very different kind of movie. Die Hard with Ann Sears. She brings outstanding analysis through multiple lenses to this one. Even if you're a diehard for Die Hard, I think you'll find something new in Ann's take. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, all the things. Those reviews in particular, no matter how long or short, really help us reach more people. You can follow us on Instagram at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
Made crazy, stupid money for crazy, stupid things. If